In 334 BC, Alexander began one of the most famous military campaigns in history against the greatest empire known to the ancient world, Persia, or as it was known back then, the Achaemenid Empire. 3 years later, Alexander had given the Persians two major defeats and had full control over Asia Minor. For the first time in history, the Persian Empire was on the ropes. Darius III had even tried to sue for peace with Alexander and proposed to give him the hand of his daughter, and his dowry would be half of Persia. Alexander replied with, he does not need Darius to give him those things, as he has already taken them. This all comes to head when Alexander, now having full control of Egypt, decides to go to the heartland of Persia. Darius III assembles the remnants of his army following the Battle of Issus and calls out recruits all over the Persian Empire. He then marches towards Alexander and meets him at a plain field called Gaugamela. Darius had hoped that this plain field would play to his advantage, as his superior numbers could envelop the smaller Macedonian army, even as going as far as to remove obstacles and flatten the land even more so his cavalry and chariots could move more unopposed. In total, Dariuss' army numbered around 90,000, comprised of 40,000 light infantry, 10,000 heavy infantry, 35,000 cavalry, 1,500 archers, 200 chariots, and finally 15 elephants from India. Alexander, on the other hand, only had 47,000 men, 30,000 being mainly Greek hoplites and Macedonian heavy infantry, 10,000 being skirmishers or light infantry, and the remaining 7,000 was composed of the linchpin of Alexander's army, his heavy cavalry. With Alexander marching towards his camp, Darius puts his army to the field. He arranges his cavalry in a massive line on each flank and places himself in the center with his heavy elite immortal infantry and archers. In front of them are his 200 chariots lined up. Behind the main line is a massive force of untrained light infantry and his war elephants. On the other side is the Macedonian army. Coming into this battle, Alexander already knew he was going to be vastly outnumbered. He had to think of a way to undermine this advantage that Darius had over him. In their last encounter at the Battle of Issus, the terrain minimalized the number advantage that Darius had over him. However, this was an open field, the perfect terrain for Darius to maximize his numerical advantage. Alexander had to find a solution to this problem. At last, he came up with the idea to have his army arranged in an echelon formation or a slant, with his right flank being closest to the Persian line and his weaker left flank being the farthest. Thus, Alexander had to arrange his army appropriately, with his center being comprised of Greek hoplites and Macedonian heavy infantry, with light infantry and skirmishers in front of them. Behind them is a second line of infantry made up of Greek mercenaries. His left is commanded by his trusted friend and advisor, Parmenion, and composed of Thessalian cavalry and light infantry. His most forward position, the right flank, was made up of archers, light infantry, and his most elite cavalry, the companion cavalry. This is where Alexander had stationed himself. The battle begins in the center, with Alexander ordering his phalanx to march forward at the same time he takes his companion cavalry to the right. Darius orders his cousin Bessus to take the cavalry on the left flank and mirror Alexander's companion cavalry. He then orders his cousin to flank around and attack the Macedonian right. At the same time, the Persian archers unleashed volleys of arrows on the center phalanx, and the chariots began their charge. However, the chariots were not effective as Darius had hoped they would be. Most of the charioteers were either killed or taken over by the Macedonian light infantry, and to those that did make it through the first line, the Greek phalanx just opened their ranks and allowed the chariots to go through, to meet their ends by light infantry in the back. Fierce fighting takes place on the Macedonian right flank, and though outnumbered, they began to push back. With Alexander's attention on his right flank, Darius orders his cavalry on the right to charge at the Macedonian left. Parmenion is barely able to hold on. This forces the Macedonian reserve line to be deployed to the left flank. At this time, though, Alexander sees something. There's a gap between the Persian center and the Persian right. He sees an opportunity and decides now is the time. He orders his companion cavalry to disengage and take any phalanx units that he could withdraw from battle. He reorganizes them into a wedge with him leading in the front of it with his companion cavalry. He charges at the center. The Persians and the Macedonians collide and fierce fighting between the Persian infantry and the Macedonian phalanx breaks out. However, the Macedonians are gaining the upper hand, and Alexander, leading the companion cavalry himself, is very close to where Darius is stationed. Darius, in full panic, takes the reins from his injured charioteer and flees the battle. Most of the Persian centers, seeing their king flee, also began to retreat. As a last effort, Darius orders the Indian cavalry to rescue his family from the Macedonian camp. The Persian center is in full retreat, and Alexander is in high pursuit of Darius III. However, an army messenger arrives to Alexander. It's from Parmenion, and he states that the left Macedonian flank is failing, and Alexander needs to send reinforcement or the battle will be lost. Alexander has no choice but to withdraw his companion cavalry and charge towards the Persians, saving his left flank. The Indian cavalry that was sent to save Darius' family from the Macedonian camp is utterly destroyed. By now, though, word of Darius' retreat has spread among the Persian rank, and the rest of the Persian forces leave the field, giving victory to the Macedonian. Overall, it's a decisive Macedonian victory. The Persians lost around 40,000 men, while the Macedonians only lost 500 men, with 5,000 more being injured, roughly 12% of their army. With the Persian army utterly scattered, the road to Babylon had been opened. Alexander then marched his army into the city and crowned himself the king of all Persia. He then renewed his pursuit of Darius, but had discovered that he had been killed by his own generals. Alexander, either to show respect to his fallen enemy or for some other reason, sought out to capture and execute these generals. And when he did so, he stood atop of the greatest empire in the ancient world. He had done what most had thought was the impossible. Time after time again, he was outnumbered, and time after time again, he came out victorious. Alexander was at the dawn of his power, and would later try to launch a campaign in India. But that is a story for another time. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you didn't like it, then, well, leave a comment. I'm open to constructive criticism. That's it. Follow me on Twitter, and have a nice day. Or night. I don't know where you live.